Yeah, I only watched this thing about 3 days ago, so the memory of it is fresh in my head. And man, was it a trip. I've had this for about a year. I like Dan Aykroyd. I like John Belushi, so I thought, they're both very funny people, so I thought, this will be good, but, well, I have kind of mixed feelings in it, so let's talk about it.
Hello? Popcorn delivery?
Put a little weekend in your week. Rent a video.
So this is the first entry in some VHS reviews. I'm a big fan of VHS, the world's most reliable format, the only format that allows you to watch any movie you want, anytime, anywhere, provided you're within the Earth's magnetic field. You don't need an internet connection, you don't even need cable. All you need is a VHS player, a TV, and a VHS, all of which I conveniently have. So it is the ultimate in home entertainment. Anyone who says VHS is dead doesn't know what they're talking about. Anyone who says VHS tapes degrade doesn't know what they're talking about. Because in the 90s, an innovation was offered called Hi-Fi VHS, which made VHS tapes, believe it or not, look and sound really good. I don't know if this tape has Hi-Fi VHS or not, but it looks fine and sounds fine. That said, I believe it's important to give a little context. So, for those of you who may be too young to remember this, around 1975, the release of Jaws, people get sick of all the experimental Martin Scorsese's and all the experimental Stanley Kubricks, and they're like, when we go to the movies, we just want spectacle, endless, never-ending spectacle. We want to have fun. And thus, the summer blockbuster is born, the big movie that everyone is talking about.
It is as if God created the devil and gave him Jaws.
Helming this movement, of course, were George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Dino De Laurentiis, and Robert Zemeckis. Now, the cover of this VHS tape, which depicts John Belushi going crazy in an airplane, and behind him is the plane with the shark teeth, which is his plane, so I don't know what that's all about. He never gets out of his plane in the movie, but this is a pretty accurate depiction of how this movie is. It's just one giant explosion after another. None of them are connected. It's not like a Rube Goldberg machine. This is one of the strangest movies I've ever watched, and what's really strange about it, is that Steven Spielberg frickin' made it, and Robert Zemeckis wrote it, and Steven Spielberg directed it. So you wouldn't think it's that weird, because they're like the two biggest names. But before I watched this movie, I thought Roger Rabbit was the most hyper movie. The most hyper movie of this period, but I guess I was wrong. 1941 is just the most adrenaline-fueled, hyper-surrealistic extravaganza. It doesn't hold back. It never lets up. There are no pauses for comedic effect. And this is Steven Spielberg's, I guess, first and only comedy, really. He's really good at genre films. And all of his movies, I'd say the Spielberg practice revolves around bringing back the genres he loved as a kid and putting them on the big screen for other people to enjoy. With Jaws, he revives the nautical adventure. With Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he revives the alien encounter film. He's very good at reviving genres. Indiana Jones, of course, was really which I think that was George Lucas joint. Indiana Jones is about there were plenty of heroes before Indiana Jones who did the same things as Indiana Jones, but Indiana Jones takes the tropes and motifs of the jungle adventure, Nazi archaeology genre and repackages them into a big budget, fun movie. And it's a real success. The same goes for Star Wars, which takes the tropes and motifs of older serials like Flash Gordon and, makes them into a big budget, fun movie, and the result was great. And that's not to say that Flash Gordon, the movie, isn't flippin' epic. It's I don't know, I'd say it's as good as Star Wars, but you should definitely watch Flash Gordon, the movie, if you haven't already. That said, what I think 1941 is going for is the war comedy genre, like We're in the Army Now with Jerry Lewis, or there's a lot of these, it's a very well-known genre of the 40s, because there was a war going on. Private Snafu, all that. The problem is, this isn't really a comedy. Now, the movie I could compare this most aptly to is probably It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World. For some obvious reasons. One, both revolve around a kind of hyper-stylized, hyper world where everything goes really fast and crazy shit happens. And two, they both have ensemble casts full of big celebrities and, Phil Silvers and Ethel Merman and all this. The main difference is that in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, even though it's supposed to depict a mad, 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 mad world, there aren't explosions going off every 5 seconds, people getting hit every 5 seconds. Even Mad, 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 Mad World understands that to be funny, you have to take a pause every once in a while and have characters talk. That doesn't happen in this movie. There's like 2 scenes of talking in the beginning, all of which feature people falling and explosions, and then after that, it's just people screaming and punching each other. And the back cover makes it look like some kind of like historical like comedy, like I don't know, like it makes it look like this gritty, like like interesting, like a grounded comedy, like Blues Brothers or something. That's inaccurate. It has this really grainy photo of John Belushi's plane, and John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd looking all somber, like they've just experienced the horrors of war. But that's not this movie. This is this movie. John Belushi flying around in his airplane and shooting, and people shooting. So yeah, that's this movie. It's not grounded. It's not like Caddyshack or Blues Brothers. Those have Lorne Michaels' involvement. Even though this has Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, it has nothing to do with SNL. Steven Spielberg just got them because they were popular at the time. He thought, oh, they can be funny, but they can't be funny without a script or any kind of direction. I assume there was a lot of direction involved, but none of it goes towards character development. Apparently, there's a version that's about a half hour longer, the director's cut, with more character development, more exposition. I really think that to justify all the explosions and screaming that goes around on the latter half of this movie, you'd need an hour of a character development and exposition. And here's a word to the wise, any aspiring filmmakers out there, and keep this in mind because John Hughes and Steven Spielberg have made this beginner's error. Never cut entire scenes from your movie. The screenwriters know what they're doing. They know that every scene is pretty necessary. You can cut out bits of dialogue that don't add anything. You can cut out something if it really doesn't add anything to the plot. But odds are every scene add something important to the plot. And nobody in the history of movies, no cinema goer has complained about a movie being too long. If someone goes to a movie, they're there for a night of entertainment. They don't have anywhere to go. They don't have any important appointments to get to. So make your movie 3 hours if it'll make it more coherent and flow better, and nobody will care. Nobody will give a shit. Now, of course, this is the same era which happened to Trains, Planes, and Automobiles, which is a legitimately good movie, even in the cut version. Now, this is mainly because you get to know Neil Page and Del Griffith, two very interesting, well-developed, fleshed-out characters, so you actually care when something unfortunate happens to them. Now, in the movie, Steve Martin only gets punched once. Apparently, in the cut version, he'd have gotten punched twice. Their car blows up at one point. That's kind of the maximum amount of spectacle you'll get. Their car sets on fire. But you know, that's okay, because we've spent an hour with these characters and learned about their aspirations, their motivations. We've got to see them grow, and many of the scenes in the movie are just them talking. There's plenty of, you know, fights and bickering and fun, and Steve Martin falling down a turnpike and getting dog shit all over his coat, but you know, you gotta exhibit some restraint in a comedy, or nobody will care about your characters when they get shot at, or blown to smithereens, or get punched, because nobody cares about them. They're just cartoons. Now, I believe it's important to make this point. Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi are really funny. And they're both on the cover here. John Belushi up front and then Dan Aykroyd down here. So you think that it's going to be like Blues Brothers. They're going to interact with one another and have some funny exchanges of dialogue, because they really are a great comedy duo. You know, that's why they're the Blues Brothers, because they're funny when they talk with each other. Dan Aykroyd's kind of the more straight guy, but he has this very wild persona. He's great at spouting facts, whether he's Zelensky in the supporting role of Tommy Boy, or, you know, every role he's in, he's pretty good, except this one, because they never talk once. So I'd say John Belushi gets a decent amount of screen time. This movie has like 20 characters, and you're supposed to focus on all of them, but like some of them you can't even tell the difference between. You can tell where John Belushi is, but like there's like 20 characters, and this movie expects you to keep track of them at all times, know exactly where they're at and what they're doing. And so John Belushi gets an okay, you know, he's moderately funny. Dan Aykroyd gets like 2 scenes. He talks like twice, and that's the extent to which he's in there. He gets as much screen time as John Candy. Oh yeah, did I mention John Candy is in this movie? Yeah, so is Slim Pickens, and so is Christopher Lee, the British Dracula. But you barely even notice any of them are there, because there's so much screaming and fighting and explosions. Now, you know, like, I don't know why Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi are the headers. They could have just as easily said Christopher Lee, and people would have bought tickets. But I think they're trying to, you know, say, oh, it's Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, and it's going to be funny, because you like Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, don't you? Yeah, I like Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. If they're in a comedy, this isn't a comedy. This movie cost $35 million. Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, cost $11 million. When your frickin' movie set on Earth costs 3 times what it took George Lucas to make the frickin' Death Star and lightsabers, I think you may have gone just a little teensy bit over budget on the special effects end. The poster for this movie, not this one, but the original poster, says a comedy spectacular. This tagline is designed to draw people in, much like the tagline of Young Frankenstein, one of the least funny comedies of all time, certainly the least funny Mel Brooks joint, the funniest comedy ever made. This isn't a comedy spectacular, this is a special effects spectacular. Its one goal is to show just how much money Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis have, how they can throw it at the screen and see what sticks. And oddly enough, despite all the special effects, which are amazing, none of it is funny. So it's not a comedy spectacular. It's more like a demo reel of all the cool shit you can do if you have enough money to pull it off. So some of the special effects in this are really neat, like all the explosions. They rebuilt the entirety of Hollywood Boulevard from scratch and made it look old 40s-ish, which I think is pretty admirable. You got the scene where the Ferris wheel blows up, you got the scene where the house blows up, you got the scene where so-and-so blows up, and you got like 500 extras or 1,000 extras all fighting each other and punching each other and going absolutely batshit insane. Every time I look at one of these things, I think, wow, how much money did this cost? $35 million is flipping insane for the 70s. Like, come on, like, Jesus. This movie is great at proving what I've always said, that you can do absolutely anything with practical effects. You can do as much or more as you can with CGI, and it'll look better. Everything in this movie looks pretty good. The Hollywood Boulevard set looks kind of fake, like it's obviously a set. But aside from that, like the parts that are set outside the city, they look okay. They look really good. And I wonder, like, how did Steven Spielberg do this in frickin' 1979? You know, he is a pioneer of filmmaking and all. But the main problem is that there's no, take any slapstick, which I think is what this movie mainly tries to achieve. In the first scene, a guy gets a cake on his face. What this movie doesn't understand is that you don't care about a guy getting cake on his face if you don't know who the guy is. The Three Stooges, for instance, all have very interesting little quirks and mannerisms and characteristics and personalities, and they play well off one another. So when one of them pokes another one in the eye, you actually care, because they seem like real people, real, well-developed, fleshed-out people, and that's kind of sad to think that Three Stooges are more well-developed than John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd in a Steven Spielberg movie. But that's just the honest truth. I like slapstick. It's a lot of fun to see people get punched and explosions and shit, you know. But for me to care, you have to have characters. Buster Keaton's 1 Week is a great example of prop comedy. And much like with 1941, a house gets destroyed at the end. The difference is that 1 Week slowly builds. It slowly rises. The back of this VHS says that it's a slowly, it doesn't say it's a slowly rising, it says it's a fast rising comic souffle. And that's kind of accurate. I'd say it's more or less the exact same amount of energy all the way through. Like the first 2 minutes are really quiet, but then after that it's just like complete loud explosions and people yelling and people screaming. It's fast rising? I don't know. I mean, John Belushi sets a gas line on fire in the first 7 minutes. I don't think it's fast rising. I think Steven Spielberg didn't have a very good idea of how to pace a comedy. You'd care about a house falling off a cliff at the end of the movie if a Ferris wheel hadn't fallen off a pier 5 minutes earlier, and if there hadn't been a frickin' giant ass plane chase 10 minutes before that, you can only care about something getting blown up, like the car in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, if it's been around for a while and you've had time to let it kind of sink in and think, oh, that's integral to the plot. I care about that, I don't care about anything in this movie. Apparently, John Belushi's character, Captain Wild Bill Kelso, is supposed to be the crazy one. I don't buy that. They're all the crazy one. Everyone acts like they're on some kind of drug in this movie. I guess heroin, because they're all so coked up, so hyper. I guess Dan Aykroyd exhibits a little bit of restraint. It's hard to get him to really behave that hyper, but like everyone just screams and like it's insane. So another thing about this movie is that it does a horrible job of portraying the horrors of war. Nobody dies. Like, maybe if a character died, I might think, oh, there are some stakes in this situation. A freaking bomber just crash lands and the characters don't die. Nobody dies. One guy gets freaking shot up in crossfire and he's just fine. He just does a little dance in it. Oh, haha, I'm getting freaking shot at. It's freaking World War II. Like, have a character die. Like, you can have some characters having fun, but one character should die so you care about the characters and feel like there are stakes. I don't feel like any of the bullets or bombs or anything has any kind of impact. Nobody, like a freaking tank rolls over cars and shit, and nobody gets run over by the tank, just cars, even though the streets are freaking flooded. So that's not funny. That's just not good writing on Robert Zemeckis' part, and Bob Dole, who apparently was also wrote the screenplay. This movie tries to be kind of racially provocative at some points, which I find weird. There's a lot of anti-Japanese slurs tossed around. John Belushi's like the little yellow bastards, and that is to be expected. It is 1941. They're trying to be accurate. But the submarine is entirely filled with Japanese actors playing, Japanese characters. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly okay. If Japanese guys want to play Japanese Nazis, that's fine. It's a part of their history. It's interesting to see them acknowledge it, but I don't know. It's not offensive. At one point, there's a Nazi on the sub played by Christopher Lee. You barely even notice him because there's just as much screaming on the submarine as there is on the mainland. But the Japanese guys are like, to hell with your Third Reich. We're done with that. And I don't know how accurate that is, considering this is 1941, and I don't think the Japanese were on the verge of giving up at that point. But it is just one submarine, so it's kind of meant to just explain the attitudes of the Japanese guys in this submarine alone. And I think the sentiment is that they're tired and they're sick of trying to invade America. They're not going to be able to do it, and then they sink the Ferris wheel and they're like, yeah, we win. I don't know, it's just really bizarre. Another example of this weird race humor is when they're in the tank and John Candy gets coal on his face so it looks like he's black, and the black guy gets flour on his face so it looks like he's white. I just wonder, did Steven Spielberg write this in, or did Robert Zemeckis, or what? What's the point of this? Just trying to be as offensive as possible, I guess. But it never really accomplishes that. I never felt offended or my brain never said, hey, that's some freaking next level stuff right there while I was watching this movie, because it is stupid action, non-stop explosions, and there is nothing even remotely about the human condition in here. If you're looking for a war movie, don't watch this. Heck, watch The African Queen or something. There's less shooting and it's a more grounded movie. This is rated PG, which I guess makes sense. There's no death and nobody dies, and I mean, you'd think with all the racial slurs John Belushi spews, it might be rated PG-13 or something, but I guess not. This movie genuinely is more tame than, like, Ghostbusters. You know, at least in Ghostbusters you have a slightly... You know, Ghostbusters is PG-13. I've ragged on it before for not having the guts to be rated R, but this is just rated PG, because Steven Spielberg obviously wanted to get as many butts in those seats as possible. So there's no... This is really weird, because there is a lot of, like, sex jokes and stuff in here. But I guess it's subtle enough to run past the censors, or maybe in 79, you know, when the rating system wasn't as established as it is today, they let that kind of thing slide or something. But, you know... It just tries to appeal to everyone, and in its quest to be the greatest, funniest, craziest, wackiest movie ever, it really appeals to no one. There's not one character in here I rooted for. There's not one character I really cared about. You can tell John Belushi's trying, which is nice, but he's not in it nearly enough for me to care, and we never really know who he is. He just shows up in this airplane, and that's it. Movies aren't TV shows. When you have a movie, you need to spend the first bit of the movie establishing who the characters are, so later on when they're thrust into danger, we, you know, in action and adventure, we actually care about them. I don't know who the heck this madman in his freaking shark plane is, but, I really don't care. He's not interesting. He's less developed than Bluto in Animal House, for gosh sakes.
Think your best girl look good in a kimono? Eating teriyaki off a straw placemat?
And like I said, maybe this movie would have worked better if the premise is interesting. It hadn't been done before. Now you might hear Pearl Harbor. You might think this is about Pearl Harbor. It's not. It says it's set in Los Angeles just days after Pearl Harbor, but it's not. It's set like 6 weeks, like a month and a half. And given that the war only lasted like 5 years, I'd say that's, you know, like Pearl Harbor was August of 1941, and this was like set on Christmas. Yeah, it tries to be a Christmas movie too, go figure, just like Die Hard and Gremlins gotta fit it all on Christmas, and there's Santas and stuff, and it just tries to appeal to everyone. Yeah, I wouldn't say this. This isn't about Pearl Harbor. It's not about the war either. It doesn't have any connection to reality. Well, it's not about Pearl Harbor, but like I was saying, the premise of the movie would actually be kind of fun if it was like From Here to Eternity, but with Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, and, you know, they wisecrack and make fun jokes, and, you know, there's some explosions, but not too many, because World War II wasn't just an explosion a minute. World War II was more restrained than this movie. That's all I can say about it. I guess the other thing I wanted to say was that it's a mad world. You know, all the stars are listed on the poster, which really, you know, makes it seem like it's, you know, something. I feel Steven Spielberg could have made even more money if he had put all the stars on the poster, like It's a Mad World does. You know? So, two things should be said before I end this review. Hit the half-hour mark, and So, the first thing I should say is that everyone who worked on this movie admits that they did have a shit ton of fun. This is the sort of decadent Californian movie I hate. Being a Coloradan, I don't like California. I don't get it. There's no point in having all the famous people living in the same city. Spread the talent around. This is the kind of movie where if you lived in Hollywood and you wanted to be an extra, this was your bag. If you're a Californian, ask your dad about being in this movie. He was in this movie, I guarantee it. He'll be able to point out exactly where he is, what soldier, what Marine he is in the big fight scene in the bar. And, he'll be able to point himself out to you because the amount of extras in this movie is insane. They must have included the entire population of California in here just to get all these extras on. But yeah, if you're a Californian, odds are somebody you know was in this movie. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter if the actors are having fun with all the cool props and all the fun guns. As a viewer, I want to be entertained, so you gotta kind of think about the viewer, you know? That's not optional. If the only people having fun is the actors, you done messed up, because what you're trying to make is a movie. If you want a bunch of fun, then make an amusement park ride. It'd probably be pretty good. In fact, I think there was one. I don't know. I feel like there should have been if there wasn't, because this is the kind of shit that goes, this is the kind of stuff that would work great as an amusement park ride, not so much as a movie. But yeah, this movie's set entirely in California. All the characters are Californian. Too much California. I don't get it. One positive of the movie, John Williams' score on this is really good, and Swing, Swing, Swing is a fun song. It's mostly in here. I used to listen to it on CD all the time before I'd even watch this, and it's a good song. It's very of the time. I'd say it's even as memorable as his Cantina theme. It's primo John Williams. It's a good song. The score is really good. Swing, Swing, Swing is a good song. Deserves more recognition. Go listen to it if you haven't. It's a solid jam. It's very recognizable. It works good as a 1941 theme. The other thing I guess I'll say is that if your kid is into Jake Paul and his screaming, non-stop nonsense style of comedy, and you want to wean your child onto more sophisticated comedy, 1941 might be a good starting point. There's a lot of screaming and immaturity and poop jokes in here, and so if your kid likes Jake Paul, they'll probably like this, and after you show them this, you can move on to Blues Brothers and Caddyshack and the good comedies and say, hey, oh look, it's the same guy who was in that movie you like. If your kid likes Jake Paul, they'll like this, and it's rated PG, so it's very inoffensive, except for all the racist stuff. But the other thing I can say is that if you hate Jake Paul because your kid watches Jake Paul all day, maybe pop this in. It might open your perspective, and if you thought that all the old comedies were, these crazy good, most people just think of like Trading Places or, John Landis joints and John Hughes joints and Warren Michaels joints when they think of 80s and 70s comedy. So watch this and you might think, oh, not all of them were that great, and this one is just like Jake Paul.
On camera? Is that what you want? I guess your birthday, right? And you're like, no.
It might help, bridge the gap between you and the younger generation, so to speak. I can definitely see a 5-year-old getting kicks out of this and being like, oh man, it's frickin' explosions and guns and frickin' a fat man making a squeak, ha 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 ha. But I guess that's who it was made for. Steven Spielberg trying to appeal to the younger demographic. I don't know. Does it work as a comedy? No. Does it work as a period film? No. This movie is beyond description. It is the sort of movie that could have only come out at the time it did with the process it went through. So yeah, watch it. And if you've already seen it, let me know what you think in the comments. And I don't know, this is just a weird movie, but what a movie to start my series of VHS reviews on in 1941, the craziest freaking movie of all time. And I used to think Roger Rabbit was the most hyper, unrestrained, trashy movie in existence. Or the trashiest big budget movie in existence until I saw this dribble. This would make Animaniacs look like My Dinner with Andre. No kidding. So yeah, that's 1941. If you enjoyed this review, smash the spash. Write to Nicholas Akita, 1424 Columbine Street, number 1, Denver, Colorado, 80206 if you want to support this work. And yeah, that's about it. Press the skike and smash the fash, and I'll see you in the next one. Frickin' whoa, got some good VHS takes on the way, some spicy VHS looking stuff. It seems as if the VHS format has some movies on it which could not be in any other format, and you look at something like Michael Keaton in One Good Cop and you wonder, is this the Michael Keaton I know, or is this some other Michael Keaton? How they drag him into it. But yeah, that's it. And I'll see you in the next one.